Narendra, please introduce office bearers.
Yeah.
This thing.
We just concluded a meeting with the UGC regarding the guidelines for institutional development plan, which is already now in the public domain. So around a lot of things are happening. So I'll be happy to share that, sir, with some of the members. So it will be as fresh as 1 hour ago. So happy to share that.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Welcome. Welcome all. In this evening, we will be having this webinar on NEP, implementation of National Education Policy 2020, drivers and barriers. We have with us Dr. Chetan Singai, today's speaker. Before we start the session, I would like to speak a few lines about IEEE Education Society. IEEE Education Society, they recently started, though it is very recently started, we have actually bagged the Chapter Achievement Award. This is first time for the IEEE Education Society in India. Usually we used to get in different countries, for different countries, but this time it's first under the leadership of our chair, Dr. Venkat Shivareddy. And we have with us the office bearers of this society. Dr. Bindu Thomas, Vice Chair, and we also have Dr. Bharti, Secretary, and we also have Dr. Kumudini Ravindran. She is Chair-elect, and we have Dr. Raghavendra P, and he is also office bearer. This time he's been elected. So under this leadership, I think we will be able to do some more events like this. I request Mrs. Shilpa to read out and introduce the profile of the speaker, and over to you, Shilpa.
Yes, thank you, Narendra Professor. Good evening to all. It's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Chetan Singai. Dr. Chetan Singai has obtained his doctorate degree from National Institute of Advanced Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, India. His doctoral thesis was on higher education and university governance in India, a case study of public and private university. He completed his MPhil in Law and Governance at Center for the Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Chetan received his Masters in Political Science from the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He received the prestigious Erasmus Mundus Scholarship to pursue Masters in Lifelong Learning, Policy and Management, joint degree from University of London, University of Aarhus, Denmark, and University of Deusto, Spain. Dr. Chetan has worked as assistant professor at Ramaiah College of Law, the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, and St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. He was associated with Janagraha Center for Citizenship and Democracy as research fellow, as research associated with Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances, Government of India, New Delhi, and National Human Rights Commission, New Delhi. He has been visiting faculty, Maximilian's University of Würzburg, Germany from 2014 to 2017. He is a recipient of Social Justice Medal awarded by the Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India, for his service towards human rights and women empowerment by the Honorable Chief Justice of India in 2007. He is associated with QS World Ranking as Senior Citizen, and he is a member Academic Council, Karnataka, Residential Educational Institution Society, Government of Karnataka. He was nominated as member of the committee to finalize the draft National Education Policy 2020 constituted by the Ministry of Education, Government of India, June 2019 to July 2020. He was associated with the committee to draft the National Education Policy 2017 to 2019 under Padma Vibhushan Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan, Ministry of Education, Government of India, New Delhi, as Chief Consultant, Technical Secretarist at NEP, Bangalore. He was associated as Member Secretary to the Committee to Review the Quality Mandate relating to promotion of research and MPhil PhD regulations in India. Dr. P. Balaram, former Director, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, from February to June 2019. He was nominated as member convener to the subcommittee to draft the implementation roadmap on governance and regulation in higher education aligned to NEP 2020 by Government of Karnataka. He has published 2 books and more than 25 national and international publications in peer-reviewed journals. It's my great pleasure to welcome you, sir, for this session, and I request you to take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shilpa. Yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Babu sir. Thank you, Ms. Shilpa,
Thanks.
for that elaborate introduction. Whatever it is, I'm an education enthusiast, end of the day. And I'll be always happy to share my thoughts. And once again, extending my wishes to Professor Venkata Shiva Reddy, and also knowing about the contribution he has made to make this chapter quite a recognized one in short time with very dedicated members. Very happy to be part of this discussion. So today I have laid out few slides for discussion so that we can have some sort of debate on some of the points. And then there has to be a few disclaimers that we need to make before we actually get into the actual discussion, because very often there has been a sort of a mixed perception among the stakeholders in higher education that NEP is not applicable to us. NEP is applicable to us because of regulatory bodies of different types. And also at the same time, it is also understood that most of the previous policies did not focus much on professional education, because professional education it has evolved over time in response to the changes to the market, as well as in response to the various committees and commission reports. But as a policy, at least the previous national policies have not had emphasis on how to transform and why should we transform professional education. And NEP comes in 2020. NEP 2020 is one such document which actually lays out why and in what way we need to transform from engineering to agriculture science to medical to all those professional courses. Having said that, it is also another disclaimer here that we need to be thoughtful about is that these set of recommendations of NEP are currently a sort of a visionistic in its approach. Based on that, now we are seeing many amendments, new acts, new regulations, guidelines coming out from regulatory bodies. So often we tend to misunderstand the policy per se is a law. Policy is a more of a vision document which now percolates down to the executive and the legislature, and now they are actually, though it has been approved by the union cabinet as a document, as a vision document, from there are the sort of acts, laws, regulations which are now coming out gradually. So with this set of pointers, let me share my slide so that we can yeah. Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So what are the drivers and barriers? So that is something which I would like to focus upon. But before that, let me also share with you, in order to overcome certain sort of clarity behind this whole vision. What is this vision of the NEP? Because based on the vision is what we see the recommendations coming out. And that is why engineering education, medical education, law education, or legal education, then pharmacy, social sciences, all of them have to respond to this, and they are now doing responding to that, because as I was just telling at the beginning of this presentation, an hour ago, the University Grants Commission, which eventually is going to be subsumed along with AICTE into Higher Education Commission of India. We are just discussing the draft bill, and the draft bill is almost ready. There are hardly small minor changes here and there, so that in the coming session or eventually a special session where they want to approve in the parliament, because that's a law which comes out of the NEP, that is called as the Higher Education Commission of India. In course of time, AICTE, UGC, and all regulatory bodies except medical and law would be now subsumed under that, right? So if those meta level changes are happening, what are the sort of impact that we see on our education system? And often we should not be only focusing on individual, but also we should focus on the institution as well as the systemic level. But what's the vision? The vision here is to have an India centered education system which contributes directly to transforming our nation sustainably. And that is why it's very critical that we need to talk about what's the role and relevance of engineering education vis-a-vis other social sciences and how they interact with each other into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high quality education to all. So this vision encapsulates excellence, equity, and expansion. All the three E's of what higher education ought to be. But the critical point here is this question of in being India-centered education system. And it doesn't mean we should be parochial. We should be narrow-minded. When we say India centered is we are not closing our mind and thought process or our vision towards the world outside the country. But let us also reflect, which we have not done for a long time, is to focus on what is good and what is our strength within the nation first and consolidate it and then engage internationally and vice versa. And that is something very critical. Now, when we see the challenges that are on ground, this I always share in all my webinars so that we actually understand the context of higher education in the country, which many of us have understood in our own set of process that we are involved in. But as a whole, as a systemic perspective, what are the challenges that the higher education system is facing? And this is not only for social sciences or for other courses, but engineering science also is facing this biggest challenge. For example, I'll go to the third one directly while you can read the other points. Rigid separation of disciplines, right? So what has happened is over time, we have created two problems in terms of this rigid separation of disciplines, right? Within engineering, there are multiple chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, electronics, so on and so forth. And across the discipline, that is engineering, medicine, social sciences, law, natural sciences. So we have created those kind of structures. Now, what has happened because of that? There are two problems. One, very early in the life of a particular student, as early as their ninth or 10th grade, they have been pushed not by their own choice, but by pressures of family and so-called well-wishers or advisors that we have, mentors. Unfortunately, they push saying that you need to, and in India, we go one step ahead. When the baby is born, we decide that what the baby should do, engineering, medical, already. The baby doesn't even know what the world looks like, but it's as early as that we decide for them. And that is one problem of this rigid separation. Second is the rigid separation in terms of faculty members. And it really amazes me, and please correct me, you're all into this domain of engineering education for a long time. And please correct me and please prove me wrong for the sake of discussion. I'm being a little provocative in a friendly way. That within engineering science also, a person from electronics engineering will never want to interact with a person from mechanical engineering. It's such a sort of silo, either because of self egos, either because that they don't have an opportunity, or either just because they don't feel that need for interaction, right? And that is happening. And I'm not saying it happens in all institutions. There are islands of excellence, but in a sea of mediocrity. So we have thousands of engineering colleges. Maybe there are few, 5, 6, 10 colleges which are doing, but the remaining 900 plus colleges are not able to even engage in seeing each other. And many times it's also the infrastructure. The very fact that the staff room and the faculty room is built in such a way that there's no choice for them to interact at all. Hardly they get time that too in the tea break or something like that. So there is so those kind of structural limitations, those kind of attitudinal limitations to interact, because it is believed that multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and transdisciplinarity is most effective way of solving problems, which is the crux of engineering sciences. How to solve problems, how to engage in problem to make it faster, better, and cheaper, and hence scalable. I think that is where interdisciplinarity comes in a very effective way, and that is why NEP committee members have acknowledged the third bullet point here as, along with the other ones, as the major challenge that our higher education ecosystem is facing, and we need to recommend certain policies to overcome this particular challenge. As a result of this, in the policy document, there are recommendations for overcoming this challenge, which I'll discuss in some examples. But this is the context. That is one important problem. The second of all the reasons which are very critical is we want to do many things as teachers. We want to do many things as an institution, but both of us don't have autonomy. For an institution, there are too many barriers, too many control systems. For an institution, there are many sort of checkpoints from various regulatory bodies. From a teacher's point of view, the institution itself becomes a checkpoint at the first stage. That is the leader of the institution, or the HODs, who are the biggest gatekeepers. And I'm just saying this again, keeping in mind majority, not all, because we feel the HODs are also very critical. They can become the biggest enablers or drivers. They can become the biggest or the worst barriers for any sort of innovation. So both are possible. So that itself is autonomy issue for teachers as well as for institution. So there are two sorts of autonomy issues. Again, for this, NEP makes series of recommendations, right? Then lesser emphasis on research in most universities and colleges. So what when you talk about research, we always look at the Ivy Leagues of the US. Similarly, we have the institution of national importance, right? But there are many colleges who are not getting enough grants, not able to have much time for doing research because they do a lot of teaching. Teaching is their primary function. Then, of course, they don't have autonomy to engage in any sort of niche areas of research. That is a biggest challenge. That is why we need to have systemic reforms, which NEP talks about. But at the institutional level, I always feel that there is a lot of scope for innovation and change in a limited capacity, which I'll come to that in the other set of slides. So, in a sense, if you see, these are the 10 major problems or challenges which the NEP 2020 acknowledges that needs serious thought process, that needs a series of interventions to make our higher education system very much receptive to the needs of 21st century. And hence, policy recommendations have been provided based on these challenges and beyond. Now, what are those processes that are taking place? So, to overcome these challenges, we have the document. That document has been approved, and based on that, respect to state government. In fact, Karnataka has been the first state to declare as well as to start implementation of the NEP 2020 by having a task force which has given the way forward. At state level, there are certain sort of activities. As central government also, in addition to various gazette notification like the Academic Bank of Credit, then there is a series of interventions that, as I said a few hours ago, the UGC has started to think about this and issued a public notice on giving feedback on institutional development plans, which is also one of the policy recommendation. So there are many things, including the national curriculum framework under the chairmanship of Dr. Kasturi Rangan again, where they're developing the curricular at the school level so that they can be a sort of system where they see education as a continuum in terms of whatever happens in school education will have impact on higher education, which was not earlier seen because they were seen as two watertight compartments. So those things are changing in a way. But when you talk about implementation, I just gave some glimpse of these two levels. But this is where we all, and a society like yours and a chapter like yours, could make a huge difference here as well, along with making sort of representation or advocacy to these two levels. But here is the action which is required. This is where most of the drivers and barriers are emerging in order to appreciate NEP and to implement NEP. So I'll go in some details in some of those aspects now at the institutional level and at the individual level, because the other two levels are there. But if you read the policy document, and let me make another important point here for your thinking, and again, another debatable proposition for you to discuss is 70% of the recommendations of the national education policy does not need any government circular order or any regulatory body like AICT to tell you and us to do what we want to do as teachers. For example, making learning discovery based, making learning joyful, making learning creative, and to have students who are able to solve problems is the crux of NEP, the foundational principle of NEP. Does that need us to seek any government order or circular? Maybe not. But there has to be certain changes at the institutional level and at the individual level, starting from attitudinal aspects to governance aspect, leadership aspect, to make sure that we are able to do those things. Because that's the crux of education, that higher education, what you call purpose of the higher education system, right? So that is what NEP is trying to reiterate constantly. Breaking the silos, right? Between us is there's no circular require that I should break the silos from others, but it is my individual responsibility to go ahead and break those silos and to see in a university like, for example, in our Ramaiah University, for example, there's engineering FET, we call it, Faculty of Engineering and Technology. There is School of Social Science, there is School of Law. There's there is absolutely nothing which could stop all three of us to interact and to see how we can come out with a multidisciplinary project or a multidisciplinary teaching mechanism. But time is our enemy, biggest barrier. Second, maybe distance in terms of managing the time. Third is maybe it's our attitude that it's not happening. But I'm just trying to give an example. This is what NEP is trying to harness, for example. But let me put these things into three buckets. One is teaching as a core function, because anywhere in the world you go, any higher education institution, anywhere in the world, will do at least two or all the three of these functions, right? Definitely teaching, mostly because there's a degree awarding institution. When I talk about universities anywhere in the world, research and extension of service activities, right? So let me go deeper into some of these three core functions, because this is where NEP makes interventions and makes policy recommendation and talk through what are the drivers and barriers there. Let me take the first one, teaching, right? Now, in the under teaching, what NEP is trying to say, that we need to have our curriculum being multidisciplinary and holistic. That was the first. Second, we should have teaching which is student centric. Third, we should have a curriculum to develop language proficiency, scientific temper, sense of aesthetics, ethical reasoning, digital literacy, knowledge of India, and so on and so forth. And fourth, we should also appreciate technology as an integrated part of curriculum delivery and assessment and teaching. For example, these are the four important points among many things. But to do that, what are those ground level issues at each institutional level? For example, how do we do multidisciplinarity and holistic approach, right? For example, now we have already institutions who are supposed to follow choice-based credit system before the NEP itself. That itself was a good starting point for institutions to be ready to engage in multidisciplinarity and holistic. But unfortunately, what happened under the CBCS? Social science students took social science courses as choices, as electives. Engineering students took engineering as choices, as electives in a multidisciplinary university. But there was no harnessing of both. I'll give one example. Women in STEM discipline and their professional development and leadership positions of women in STEM discipline is pathetic in this country. Very less, right? Out of 10, there is only one woman and versus 9 men who are holding leadership position among STEM disciplines, CSIR, INSA, take many, even academies. Very rare. Now, that's the biggest problem, right? Because there is a sort of a stigma, there is a sort of perception that there are no qualified women, which is not worthy to believe. But also, it's believed that they have multiple tasks to attend at personal end, so hence they're not able to make good managers or leaders. Another proposition, it's not worth believing, but it is a perception also. But the question here is that in the choice-based credit system, a science student must be exposed to sociology, must be exposed to gender studies, must be exposed to women's studies, to ask appropriate questions when they move into the ladder of their career and engage in such challenges. So that is the idea of this choice-based credit system, which is supposed to be like a good analogy is about a buffet in a hotel where you go and pick so you create your platter of what you want to study. That was the intention, but it did not make through. But NEP is now trying to reiterate it by saying, let us have courses, this is choice of electives, but the entire program itself is multidisciplinary, where you bring in liberal arts education into engineering, where you bring in creativity and creative based learning, and engineering science learning into social sciences or liberal arts. So it has to be perfect blend, right? So that is what the intention was. And that is where the challenge comes, because again, there are attitudinal aspects. Again, there are awareness or lack of awareness related aspects, lack of preparedness related aspects. And then there is also sort of belief that social science is a lesser science than the other sciences. So hence there is a perception around it, and that is why there is sort of a resistance towards bringing in this kind of multidisciplinarity, and that's the biggest barrier. And I think but there are many drivers, because the same student, when they go abroad, they get exposed to all these things, right? When they go to Ivy League institutions, when they go to any other institutions, they're exposed to these things. They're supposed to do anthropology, they're supposed to do ethnography, they're supposed to do some interesting work related to non-engineering when they are taking up courses in engineering sciences. But we can't give experience of the same thing here, because we have a certain set of perceptions that maybe students are not ready, or maybe there is a lack of institutional support. So NEP is trying to say, why not recreate that environment wherein there is multidisciplinarity, choice, flexibility, and curriculum which is student centric. So there I would give one example, so that we can all reflect upon it. To make this thing successful, as simple as our timetable is very interesting, because if you are able to create a timetable as an institution, which is your prerogative in most cases, because universities have their flexibility and autonomy to create the timetable. Maybe affiliated colleges will have a challenge, because sometimes they will be given a sort of timetable from the university, but at least most of the universities and autonomous colleges are ready to take on. Is that how do you create the timetable? How much, for example, you have first hour as course X, second hour as course Y, and see whether there is a gap of 20 minutes or 10-15 minutes where X and Y course learnings can be brought in together, where there's learning happening, for example, within the engineering science. Or you create an adventurous timetable really to make sense about the whole multidisciplinarity, where you create sort of timetable such a way that students are able to attend other courses elsewhere. So it is difficult, as they say, it is better said than done. But we, as in teaching, also we do that, where we are creating that timetable wherein students will have chance to go and visit other schools, other disciplines, and attend the classes just to audit the classes. Right? Imagine an engineering student going and attending a sociology class or a management class, which they anyways do MBA later on because of labor market pressures. So why not give that option of auditing, where they simply go and sit there and get exposure, which otherwise anyways they're also doing through YouTube and MOOCs. Many times they don't tell us, but they're already doing it, most of them. So that timetable itself has to be built in such a way that it enables multidisciplinarity and holistic growth of an individual. That is what is an example. There are many barriers, no doubt, but at the same time, there's a driver for us that a student is going to benefit from all these efforts and how we overcome this barrier. That's my optimism there, and I understand we'll discuss about the challenges and maybe have some sort of debate on that. Definitely, please note your thoughts. The other thing is rationalizing credit system. What happens if you want to do all this innovation, if you want to do major changes in the way we teach today, we need to overcome our rigid credit system. What has happened over time is most MTech programs, BTech programs, and other engineering science programs are often engaging in more credits than required. So, in other words, they're going with maximum, not with minimum, because there's a belief, especially for universities, there's a belief that more number of credits means that is more teaching is more effective rather than giving them more time. And hence I understand that some of us don't get chance to make these decisions at leadership level, but if we are able to start as an association, as a chapter, if you all come together and make representation about this fact, if you believe in that, that we should go with a minimum number of credits so that there's more time for them to be exploring in terms of other courses, engaging in actual problem solving, trying to have some sort of multidisciplinary ecosystem which they can enjoy through discussion and so on and so forth. by going with minimum credit, it'll have more value. That is what the holistic growth comes in. Life skills are evolving, soft skills are evolving, and so on and so forth, and makes the learning very discovery based and joyful. The other last point here on this slide is the importance of board of studies and academic council. Very often, apart from the affiliating colleges, which have limitations, though they can overcome those, but still, right now they have limitations. But autonomous colleges and the universities, it is important that when we choose our board of studies, and I'm being very, what you call, generalistic here, so please pardon me on that. But in most cases, I have seen BOS is nothing but they handpick people who are actually known to each other, and they are accessible through phone call, and they are able to sort of agree to each other. In other words, there is this practice of you scratch my back, I scratch your back, as simple as that. I'm telling about majority, not all. And I believe that we can again debate about it, because I have been there, seen that, and done that, in the sense that as an observer in most institutions, I feel that is a challenge. Why it is a challenge? Because if that whole circulation of thought is limited to only this sort of thought process, I'm not saying they're not important, but over time they lose their value, because the same wisdom, the same knowledge is circulating, and there's very limited exposure to something new. And that is what is NEP is talking about. At a systemic level, I'm setting a vision, but now at the institutional level, this is where you all have to bring it together and implement. And that's why BOS is a very important body, and it will become more important over time, because of bringing in multidisciplinarity and so on and so forth. The BOS has to approve, and then of course the eventual academic council and so on and so forth. So it's a bottom up approach, and we need to ensure that we make the best. So in teaching, this could be some sort of barriers and drivers that are emerging. But as I said, if we all as teachers and as researchers value that, end of the day, the beneficiary is our student. End of the day, the beneficiary, the student himself or herself is able to enhance his or her life skills, soft skills, and knowledge through this kind of an experimentation for now, and a practice eventually over the years. I think that's an outcome that we should all cherish, and that's what NEP is trying to aspire by institutional autonomy. In terms of research, I'll come back to the credit point, because there's a complaint, which is a valuable complaint, acknowledgeable complaint, or a grievance, that we hardly get time to do research because we do too much teaching, right? Why it happens? Because as I go back to the earlier point, that is, we need to rationalize the credit system. Otherwise, we'll end up in having too many class hours unnecessarily, because with a minimum credit, a student will get a degree which is recognized. Why should we go for maximum? Instead, those hours where students will be free to do what they want to do, with of course some mentoring, because they might be too young to decide initially, but they can. But my belief system does not allow me to think that they're too young, because the same young student, when they go abroad, they're able to do multiple things, they're able to do very innovative things, right? So there are this contradiction, but the idea is to reduce the credit hours to the minimum as per the regulatory bodies, minimum, and not go to maximum, so that you can get more time for research as teachers, and students will also get more time for solving problems. Then when we talk about research, it is not just research for DST project or ICMR projects and so on and so forth. It is just one part. But the other part is research for teaching. Are we able to cite this morning's paper published in any journal in this afternoon's class? I'm being very optimistic again, but I'm just trying to put that thought process in mind. That is, we have to be researcher teachers, not just researcher for research, but researcher teachers. How effectively we are bringing new knowledge into the classroom, and how much of inquiry that we are doing on day-to-day basis. I'm sure there are people doing, but it's not a rule. It is just some here and there exceptions. So that's one other thing which NEP talks about under continuous professional development. So under continuous professional development, it is not just a refresher course here and there. And I don't know about IEEE refresher courses or engineering science refresher courses, but in most of the refresher courses I have been attending, especially in UGC, HRDC, Human Resource Development Centers and all, I feel they are merely refreshment course. They're worried about what is offered for lunch and snack rather than what is refreshing there. That's not the way to do refresher courses. It's a refresher course should be a continuous professional development where under each institution, you yourself as faculty members or through chapters like yours, engage in continuous professional, maybe fortnightly, monthly. What are the changes that are happening in the domain? How do we enhance that? So through that, I think this whole researcher teacher versus the idea of faculty with specialization from multidisciplinary outlook, promotion of research, innovation can happen, right? And research projects, I think engineering sciences has the major responsibility today and opportunity, especially for Indian knowledge system. AICT themselves, I think they have now made, please correct me, an elective or sort of a course on Indian knowledge system, something where it has been asked to be taught, but that is just a sort of a reference point. But there's huge funding available, up to 10,000 crore, which has been sanctioned last budget for scientific and validation studies on Indian knowledge system, right? So we have many practices that we have in the country where we don't have any much of scientific value add, whether it's about traditional medicine or traditional practices. So there's a lot of scope for scientists and engineering professionals to engage in such kind of projects. There is a website called iks.gov.in where they have proposals and discussion points laid out. And of course, industry academia linkages. I'm sure most of you are tired of listening this. And why so? Because it is a very important component, but we have not yet had this full-fledged collaboration. So NEP again reiterates that point. Under the service point, uh, again, this is critical because when you talk about engineering students, when you talk about holistic development, they should just not be robotic or mechanical in their approach. So we have, every institution has something called NSS, NCC, blood donation camps, cultural activities, and so on and so forth, because it helps in holistic growth of the individual, where they develop soft skills and life skills. So here in NEP, they recommend that going forward, as per the curricular reforms, those activities like NSS and NCC and cultural activities, which we till date call it as extracurricular and co-curricular, should become curricular because we need to give credits for them for contribution of their time and efforts, and to acknowledge that and assess how they have gained life skills and soft skills to the extent possible. So, in other words, in future, in the next few years, there is no such differentiation between curricular, extracurricular, co-curricular. Everything will be acknowledged, accounted, and credited, and hence it becomes curricular. Currently, there are no linkages between curriculum and research, which is a challenge. And NEP talks about, as I said, teacher researcher, very critical under the continuous professional development. So there is a linkage that could happen. And the last important point under extension service is that, and as well as the teaching and curriculum part, is we need to shift from formative assessment to summative assessment. So sorry, from summative to formative. From summative to formative. Summative means end of the semester we assess some total knowledge of the individual by virtue of their memory and their recall. We're able to assess. But formative means it is over the semester, over the year, how the individual has evolved, right? And that is a major transformation shift under the curriculum as well as under the service activity, because some of these activities also come under that. So that gives more role and scope for teachers to constantly observe your students and learners, so that not in the micromanagement kind of a sense, but observe in the sense that you are able to assess the change and the evolution, which could be the Darwinian evolution of the individual when they enter the college to the time they leave. So that is a formative assessment. And that is a major shift that NEP talks about. I have few more thoughts on this slide, but maybe let me take a pause for any questions because it is becoming monotonous and I'm unable to see most of you. But I have few slides, but I'll not complete them because maybe I'll take some questions for now and then maybe move on. Narendra Babu sir, sometimes I'm also afraid that the people are there on the other end or not. I'm just kidding. Hello, sir.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Yes,
Sir, can
madam.
you throw some light on formative assessment? Just now you are speaking about that, how it could be done in an higher education. Yes.
Yes, madam. So right now there are few approaches that some institutions are following. Number one, it is institutional specific. assessment mechanism. There should not be, and currently there is no such overarching guidelines that every institution must do like this. Unfortunately, summative assessment is one such approach where they have given that there should be one midterm, one two assignment or X, Y, Z, right? But for formative, it is not like that, because each institution is an entity by itself, because each institution's student profile, faculty profile, and the location of the institution and its sort of what they call in management SWOC, strength, weakness, opportunity, and challenges are, and resources are different. So each institution, they have to develop that formative assessment. That is the first point. Second, under formative assessment, here we mean that you have to constantly observe the learning of the individual student through not just formal teaching learning, but through other activities that is surrounded around that teaching learning. It could be your student clubs or associations activities, students interest in solving social problems where they are able to go and apply their engineering knowledge on the field through NSS and NCC and so on and so forth. So there are many ways of looking at it. So there are no guidelines as such that this is ABC of formative assessment. It is supposed to be organic sort of an experience which is institution specific, but the objective is very clear that whatever graduate attributes that AICT or NBA defines, you may want to refer to that, but make sure that the assessment of those attributes are done through over the semester, over the year, how an individual is forming one's personality and holistic growth. Am I making sense, Professor Bharati? So it is institutional specific. So, and your BOS has to deliberate on it and come back with set of guidelines.
Thank you, sir. Sir, is there any university which has implemented this type of formative assessment, sir, already?
There
In
are,
your...
yeah. Who is asking this question? Professor Bharati?
I am Dr. Bharti from Reva University. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So because Dr. Archana also, her mic was on.
Yes,
So
sir, I would also like to, but maybe
I
you can
remember,
first
I remember
answer
her
to.
voice. I remember her voice. That's why I was sure that it was yes, madam. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so you
Okay.
finish with Dr.
As
Bharti first, maybe then I'll
sure,
ask
sure,
later.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yes, madam. There are many institutions who have implemented it across the country. And for example, if you are asking for engineering science, I may not tell you the numbers immediately, but I can tell you about Ashoka University, who has already done that. Shiv Nadar University, who has already done that. And among the public state university, actually in Karnataka, Krishnadevaraya University, Ballari, they have done that. But the point, as I repeat myself, is these three are examples, but these three have done the formative assessment as per their assessment and needs and their local context and the profile of the students. And hence it will vary from institution to institution. But the intention or the outcome is common, that is to enable a learning environment which is holistic, a learning environment which adapts to life skills of the individual and soft skills. You might heard about this sort of anecdotes or what is that called, panchatantra stories, that a child carrying a ball of
Yes,
butter. That
yes.
is what is the life skills and soft skill. That is what leads to holistic assessment and formative assessment. Am I able to connect with you on that?
Sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Madam Archana, Madam.
Yeah. Sir, just I wanted to ask you one thing about this formative assessment. So in this formative assessment, just now, as you said that we had to, assess the student based on maybe a continuous observation or, some kind of activity. And that is what is my understanding is about it.
Yes.
So, okay, fine. This we can be done, but I don't understand how it can be actually means practically implemented in a classroom at UG level where there are 60 students in a class. Generally, for PG at least I can understand because number are small, so maybe possible. But at UG level, how to do this one? And second question is, if this observation and all, how we should document it? Because I think at the end of it, even some kind of records are needed if we are going for some kind of accreditation or even for our university records also, we may needed that kind, because we will be giving them some kind of marks or, grades for them. So how to go about it, sir?
I think the best example is to reflect on the shift that engineering education saw in terms of adopting the NBA's graduate attributes, right? It was not from day one of engineering education, right, madam? It came in between.
Yeah.
That there was a shift towards that 12 or 11 graduate attributes that you are supposed to have, 11 or 12?
12, sir.
12, yeah. So, yeah. So when was it approximately in 2000s, year 2000 or in the middle of 2000? That shift which was supposed to be there, roughly, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm just asking. I don't know.
2015, I guess, sir.
Yeah, roughly 15. Let's say 20 years from whatever it is. So it has come to you in due course of your engineering education. This whole process which you had to adapt. And what has it done? It has structured the whole assessment mechanism based on those set of graduate attributes that a student must have end of the course, right?
Yeah.
Now, let's imagine the same structure for identifying sort of formative assessment. I'm not saying we should ignore those. Let those be the outcomes. But the process of evaluation, instead of asking them to write an assignment, which is based on theory or concepts, give them problem-based assignments, right? Where they actually go and engage. For example, Bangalore was suffering from this Vartur Lake problem for so long, right? Can this bunch of engineering students with maybe chemical engineering students, for example, I'm not a expert in that, but I'm just, please bear my little understanding on this. Can they actually go there and solve that problem and you assess them on that? Am I making sense? So
Yes,
there you
yes, yes.
assess the solution. There you assess the teamwork also.
Correct.
But even the GAs have those teamwork component. Even the GAs have the technology component, or what is that, the core discipline knowledge component. So I'm not saying let us take a U-turn from those things. Let us keep that in the back of the mind and see how we can transfer. That is why I kept saying that the board of studies is the one which should now engage in not just the curriculum but also the assessment mechanism at that level, and then you take to the BOE and the academic council and so on and so forth. So that is why the BOS itself has to be multidisciplinary. The BOS itself must be able to appreciate the importance of formative assessment. If you have one or two people who say this is not at all valuable, this is not at all possible, then it'll never move on. And no government order or circular will make sense. So that's what I was trying to say. If I am able to communicate that point in terms of how do you shift the emotion behind the assessment is what is important today in terms of formative assessment. There is a lot of science behind formative assessment. I'm not sharing it as a sort of a theological or a philosophical thing. There's a lot of science behind it. Many countries have adopted it for over time, and most of our students, when they go abroad, they enjoy that formative assessment. But I'm sure some of us who have done our degrees abroad have lived by that, and we still cherish those moments. But when we come back, we don't want to adapt it here because we say there are structural constraints, there are attitudinal constraints, we say many things. But I'm sure in our own capacity, we can try to do in terms of assignments and take the BOS into confidence, and we can move on to that and make this engineering education transformative. There's an interesting paper, which is, I think, very soon to be published in, there's a journal called JEET, right? Journal of Engineering Education Technology, JEET. So there's a paper which is about to come. I just had a chance to review that paper, wherein they have assessed that how much of engineering science related education happens at school level, where we can actually expect them to do excellent work in their undergraduate level as compared to medical, because at least they have biology as an exposure, for example. But there is math, yes, but math is also not as that we expect in the application of that in the engineering sciences. So there's actually no exposure for them of any sort in the school level. That was a very interesting paper. They have done a comparative study very soon. I think the review has been accepted or something very soon. But I'm just trying to think. Now, those are the moments of rethinking and revisiting the whole thing. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Yes, any other questions? Because I just had the last point to share before I conclude and again open up for questions. I know Saturday evening, both sides we have challenges. Um, One important point here in this sort of transitions, and I'm glad that you all are asking these questions so that you really want to make it happen. That's why you are seeking inputs and clarification. I'm sure it will happen. And there are a lot of discussion points. And of all the people I have seen, Dr. Anil Sarsabudhi is a good case in point. His College of Engineering Pune is a great example. There has been a lot of interesting work around how that college has transformed to what it was to what it is today, and how even those reforms that he is now thinking through AICT to bring, because he's one of the AICT members and many other people involved, but he's trying his best. At least I've heard his speeches many occasions, and I feel that he has done very interesting sort of innovations that he wants to bring in aligned to NEP. That is one part of the story. But going forward, whether and especially as I just heard, at least few of you are, or most of you, or all of you might be, are part of a university system. Now, NEP is telling that NEP universities going forward in the next 5 to 10 years, they must evolve into three types from the current 8 types that we have. Currently, we have private state university, public state university, private deemed university, um, central university, institution of national importance. Then we have open university, central and state open university. So some 7, 8 types. So these are types based on who is owning them, in the sense who gives grant. Public state, if the most of the salary is coming from state government, it often and is an established by an act of the state government, it becomes public state university. Sponsored by a private philanthropic contribution, becomes a private state university, like that. It's ownership based. So NEP is saying, let us now overcome this issue of ownership centric sort of institutions to function based. As I said in my slide, that there are three core functions which any university in the country or the world does, that is teaching, research, and extension. What varies is the degree of priority or importance they tend to give, right? There are some, so why not look into that and focus on function based classification of institutions or higher education rather than ownership based. Hence, in due course, we are shifting towards three types of university or higher education institutions. Even the word university is to be underplayed now, because the third type will not have the word university, which I'll tell you now. So going forward, there are three types of higher education institution. One is research university with significant teaching, teaching university with some research, and degree awarding autonomous colleges, right? So what will happen with these three classification? And please don't treat them as research university is better than teaching and teaching is better than degree awarding. There's no hierarchy. That's another misunderstanding which many people have. It's just a sort of a classification. So that there is today a teaching institution, teaching intensive university can always go to research university, and research intensive university can always say, for the next 15 years we will be teaching intensive, based on their strengths and weaknesses and leadership and all other governance mechanisms. There's a sort of a very a flexible movement across the vertical, but they're not supposed to be seen as sort of watertight compartments in terms of degree of importance, because research is seen better than teaching. So the NEP is very clear on that. So having said that, these are the three types. Now, what will happen? Why one, with this affiliation system will gradually fade off. Second, it will also help in you as professionals, as teachers, to decide where you want to be. If you research is your strength, you go to research intensive university. If teaching is your passion and strength, you go to teaching intensive university, so and so. Similarly, students also will be much more clearer that where they want themselves to be, whether they want to be. So accordingly, your curriculum, accordingly your teaching methodology, accordingly your assessment methodology will also evolve and change. And this will take time. As I say, Rome was not built in a day. It will take time, but the thinking has started. That is why UGC, just when I started the call, it was 1 hour ago. Now I can say 2 hours ago. The UGC has now officially sent out a public notice, which I again urge all of you to go to the UGC website and see, and maybe I can share it with Dr. Narendra Babu also by email. The public notice that by February 11th, they want your feedback on the institutional development plan. And maybe as a chapter, IEEE chapter, you can maybe submit as a collective, where they want to know what are the thought process behind this IDP, because institutional development plan in future going forward will become a source of not just the planning of the institution, short term, mid term, long term, but as a source of accreditation, as a source of grants. And as you all know, that NEP has very clearly said that for research grants or other grants, there should be no differentiation. Other grants, not the salary part, but grants which are coming from research through National Research Foundation, there should not be differentiation between public and private university. All must be treated equally, and there should be transparency in terms of review on proposals being rejected. Today, if you send a proposal, especially to DST, it's a black box. We don't know when they're rejected also, or even we don't know if they've accepted for what was the reason on the acceptance. But we don't know. There's a black box. So there has to be some transparency. So having said that, again, let me stop here by saying that going forward, your decision as professionals will also decide on the core function of the higher education institution. Similarly, students can also decide on that, and accordingly, the whole curricular aspects will change, assessment and aspects will change, and the focus will be also very different. And accreditation, NAC, which will become as National Accreditation Council from the current NAACC, will also assess based on these types. If you're a teaching intensive university with some research, there's no meaning and purpose to assess you based on research parameters, right? Teaching is a primary thing. So all these things are happening. The Higher Education Commission of India bill is also coming into picture. Urge you to give feedback to the government on some of these documents, because many times we say we were not asked. I understand, but now there's an opportunity to give feedback so that whether they accept or not, but that will be important later on when you as personnel of institution are asked to give feedback, you can give that. So with this, I'll stop, Professor Narendra Babu sir. I'll take some questions if there are any, but I'll share you the UGC documents.
Yeah. Sir,
Uh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, please go on. Go on.
Okay, this is Bindu Thomas, sir.
Yeah,
In
please
fact,
go on.
I've been hearing your session. In fact, testing rather, because we have got three numbers, sir.
Your
Madam,
voice
we are
is not
not
clear.
able to hear well. Yeah,
Your voice
it's
is
kind
feeble.
of, yeah. So we have engineers amongst us. Maybe they can solve this problem. Narendra Babu sir.
Am I audible, sir?
It's probably network issue.
Sorry.
Network issue at
Am I
her
audible?
end, probably.
You're audible, madam, but your voice is breaking.
Now, sir, is it better?
Yeah,
Now
it's
it's
better.
better. Yes.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so this is Bindu Thomas. I am a part of a private institute. So in our institute, like when we are looking forward to do similar things, the kind of challenges that we get is, just as Archana ma'am was pointing at, the numbers, you see. So, how do we make it with the 60 numbers? That's the first thing. How do we enable all 60 doing different exercises or same exercise? It doesn't make sense. So that is the kind of challenge when we look at a formative. Yeah,
Yeah, I
summative.
think, yeah, that's true. That's true. Summative is easier because it is sort of a bulk that you can
Correct.
engage in. But
Correct.
formative, it's the number actually is not a problem for formative assessment, Dr. Bindu. It is mostly to do with the way you organize your internal assessment, or what you call continuous assessment, and semester end examinations. Because as simple as even the 60, the questions that you ask, the way you ask the questions, how do you form the questions, those are the things where you can make initial, what I call short term responses to make reforms there. And eventually you can have, as and when, as they say, that is where the teacher student ratio becomes very important. Why is that regulatory bodies insist on that? Is because there are challenges at this level wherein there are more number of students with less number of faculty, then definitely it is not possible. That's the other level of issues. But within our own milieu, we have what we call mentor-mentee program. We have something called tutorials. We have various types of assessment. So how you all now as collective should come together and see how should we transform our internal assessment mechanisms. That is, as I've said, example, problem-based assignments. Why not you assess them in groups? If there's 60, you make groups of 5 each, then you can assess them. So your unit there becomes the 5 as a group, but you have to develop that assessment mechanism. And it's not that across the world we don't have such mechanism. There are within the nation also, we can find in IITs they do that, but we say that they have more autonomy than we having it. But as a university, you have the autonomy, whether it's private state or public state, you have the autonomy. But as I said again, the BOS is a very important body where you need to get yourself engage in brainstorming sessions and getting approval, and then placing it to academic council. So I think group based assessment at the immediate level, short term, could be one idea. Going forward with this all accreditation related changes happening, NBA will come in with different set of mechanisms of assessing your reforms and evaluation, as well as the Higher Education Commission of India, where itself will subsume most of the regulatory bodies, including AICT. They will also come with guidelines. But short term, you can transform your internal assessment mechanisms in such a way that it will lead to formative assessment. But in a groups sort of thing to overcome those challenges of numbers. That's how I would see that. Have you thought about this earlier, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This way, I would like to tell you that part of it is implemented. See, in the university VTU, we have something called as activity based, like 10 marks dedicated for activity out of the total of 50.
Yeah.
CBCS is 60 plus, that's 50 plus, am I right, ma'am? 30 plus 10. So it's 10 marks is for assessment, which we do activity based, and that is generally done in groups. So there, most of it is done like how you mentioned. But ultimately, what happens is, see, main percentage is for that summative type, no? So end of the day, it again goes for it's like kind of, it ends up being an interesting act, but finally the value the students get becomes a little less than when compared to their summative approach, right? So I think that is not right.
No, because I agree to disagree for the discussion here, because what do students remember after they graduate? The 100 marks paper, or what was their interesting or life changing experience during the course, right? So what
I
do they
believe
remember more? Yeah,
this activity, yes.
yeah, activity is what they actually cherish. Why do
Correct.
they cherish? Because one, they have learned something, and second, maybe they're applying it into their day-to-day life somewhere, or some, maybe it's that is the holistic part. And they've also developed social sense. The best way to do is, madam, I feel, and there are instances of institutions which have been doing, maybe you can explore the Keli Technology University in Hubballi, which has been identified as second most recognized institution, which is after the COE, among the newer ones and the non-IITs one, where I believe in my recent interaction also, they have anchored their assessment based on the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the 16 Sustainable Development Goals, which the whole world is reflecting upon to solve problems surrounded by those 16 SDGs, and to see how effectively we are able to achieve them, right? So engineering science will provide the best possible intervention there, and see how we can have your internal assessment organized around those SDGs, right? So for example, and then there is one paper by how to say, Kowalski, Frank Kowalski and Susan Kowalski from Department of Physics, where they talk about embedded formative assessment in the undergraduate engineering classroom, right? So you can, it's available on Google, so you can find it out, by Frank Kowalski and Susan Kowalski from Colorado School of Mines from USA, on embedding formative assessment in undergrad engineering education. So I'm not saying we should borrow directly,
I
but
get
what
you.
I'm trying to say is to get the spirit behind it, but we can take the SDGs as our frame for organizing it.
Thank you
Just
so
to
much. It was very useful.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Sir,
madam.
just to add it to this,
Yeah.
what Dr. Bindu has said, that even in our university, we do follow this kind of assessment. Actually, we were following earlier also, as you said, group-based activity. So as a teacher, even I am doing that one as a part of our continuous evaluation. So we can consider that that also comes under the formative kind of assessment. So yes,
Yes.
we are doing it. We are giving student group based on group. we give them separate topics to work on and ask them to present it or write a report on it and such kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is no one size fits all kind of that's the
Correct.
beauty of formative assessment. Summative assessment will force upon you to sort of what they say in some vernacular language. There's a joke that you have a you stitch a cloth and then look for a person to fit into that. So summative assessment is like that.
Yes.
So I think formative means you stitch each student's sort of cognitive abilities and
Yes.
their sort of understanding will make them, because it is a time consuming thing. But what surprises me, or what sort of makes me to think, is that the same students, the same teacher, when they go abroad, they do it all,
No, sir.
right?
We are also doing it here at certain
No, I'm just
extent.
saying,
And
because
actually,
we feel
student
the
enjoy
systems
it,
are
sir.
good there.
Actually,
Yeah,
student
correct.
enjoy this kind of thing compared to, simply writing that examination. That is what also we had. I
Yes.
mean, I have
Yeah.
observed as a teacher.
Yeah, there are some students who will feel very unhappy if their no exams are not there. That also is there. So
Yeah,
but they're
yeah.
very less in number. But what I'm saying is, Dr. Archana, that not that we are not doing, but I'm saying
Huh.
that system there is such that
Yes.
it enables us to do. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is what NEP is trying to create it here. But it
Correct.
will take time, because
Yes.
we had a 19th century policy for a 21st century needs earlier. That was a 1986 policy. Because we don't blame that policy. They have done good job, because that time it was required to be like that.
Correct,
But
correct.
now, for the last 35 years, we did not have a direction. Now there's a thinking. This whole today's event itself is a process towards thinking on those lines.
Yes, yes.
And it will have time. It will take time to come through, but let us prepare and write about it. And I would request you, madam, to please write this as a case study in Jeet or any other journals, because unless it is out there, like Dr. Bindu was asking, that is there any example, or Bharati madam in the discussion. So maybe this, your reference, instead of me quoting Kowalski, we should say Dr. Archana Patil's article you can refer to. So that is what
Maybe,
I
sir, the
say.
thing is that we had to think it from that point of view also, that how
Yes,
to,
yes,
make it accessible to others also, what the kind of practices we are
yes,
following it, so
yes,
that
yes.
others can also get benefited from that.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
definitely when such kind of collaborations happen, we also get new ideas how to,
Yes,
go ahead with it.
absolutely, absolutely. In fact, that my statement, maybe many people, I make these statements in most forums, but I don't hear back that I'm wrong. So I have assumed that it is right what I'm going to say now, which also we have observed in the NEP drafting time. There is very limited India-based research on Indian issues by Indians in India, right? But most people from abroad are coming to India and writing about our issues. It could be
Yes, sir.
NRIs also, but I don't call them as Indians in this context. But it is, again, Kowalski, for example, he might be coming here sometime for a week and he writes about the case study which Archana madam is doing. And we just observe it and start citing it. So I'm being very provocative for the sake of telling that how much autonomy we have already got, but how there are issues which are surrounding us as barriers where we need to overcome them and start writing about it. Yeah.
Sure, sir.
Sir, good evening.
Thank
I am
you.
Raghavendra Prasad. Yeah, yeah, I am Raghavendra Prasad. I am a faculty from RV College of Engineering, and we have also. It was a really nice. You have given a very key points in implementation of NEP, and we being autonomous, we have for this current batch, we have slightly implemented using a 2 credit course based on NEP, and also many webinars are conducted so that the faculty as well as some of the students will have some awareness related to the national education policy and also the Indian knowledge system also. This is one. And my question is like
Yes.
the Generation Z is a new thought process is coming up. How do we address? Anyhow, we are formatting all these things. How do we address it? Because that is also they want all digital and so many other things. I have read about some of the papers and all. Can you address some of the key points, issues related to how do we take up this Generation Z? Because already they are having a into digital system, what we have not seen in the mobiles and the laptops in
Yes,
our
sir.
days.
Yes, sir.
So they
Yes.
are born with that itself. And how we can implement our knowledge system into this. Can you share some thought process?
So there is a two-pronged approach. One is a simple response, other one is a complicated. I first start with the complicated process, according to what I understand. So one is complicated. Why? Because it involves a lot of management approach, which often we do, is to actually conduct, because when we start new programs or new courses, we often, most often, in most cases, not all, there's a tendency to start because there's a demand, right? But we don't define the demand. Is this the demand from labor market, or is it a demand based labor market based on our evidence reports? Like, for example, India Skills Report 2020 or 21 states that data analytics is the biggest sort of demand today, and that's requiring a lot of attention. But now, this also we come to know through our anecdotal discussions, like some expert has said, some friend has said, which is also true. So, what is our criteria to define that demand as an institution, as a course leader or a teacher? That is very important. So, that is a complex process. But the simple process, which is something very close to my heart, which I have done and I am doing to the extent possible, is to involve students in the board of studies, which is the biggest change. But there's no harm. We have somebody called alumni who is there as a representative in board of studies, who represents our not only our learning and teaching methods that they have, and they are coming back and responding to the needs of the society, but have the students who is currently performing, select a couple of students and form sort of observers in the board of studies meeting and allow them to speak. They will come up and say that yes, these are the changes, because I was the student representative in academic council of Jawaharlal University, so we were able to bring in saying that no, we had a course on foreign policy of USA and UK. I said that we have done too much. The world is knowing more about it. We want to study foreign policy of East Asia, foreign policy of West Asia, foreign policy of so and so. Why? Because these are all upcoming areas, right? And we wanted to study public health in foreign policy, what is called science diplomacy, science and technology diplomacy, then itself, in as late as 1999. So, and that was brought into the picture. So I think that way, the complex process is more of institutional level, and we as teachers, the simple process is just involved. If not possible, why do in our education system, where Professor Naren Babu is also there, is to have a informal meeting or a formal meeting, either of that, with students just before the BOS meeting, and present it to BOS saying these are the students' perception, these are the students' interest, and we would like to go ahead and make this recommendation, and then take it to the academic council. So that is two-pronged approach, Professor Raghavendra sir, I could think of.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Very
Yes.
convincing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. But I'm very happy that you have taken leads. Professor Subramania and me work on various committees, so I can already see the shadow and the echoes from your side and from his thoughts also.
Yeah. Even one of the presentations into Indian knowledge system, and slightly related to NEP also, all the faculty members were called, and also some 8 to 10 student representatives were called. Once all the presentation discussions are over and students were called onto the dais, you tell what is your perspective, because we are just thinking we are maybe 35 plus, whatever the age we have experienced, but from your requirement, what is the requirement and all. They expressed a very key points related to whatever
Yes,
you
sir.
have
Yes, sir.
mentioned also. And
That's true.
even I am into this Samvit research in Bangalore, like we are developing from the
Girish Vellur,
yeah.
or
So they here
who is the Mr.
near
Lokpande?
Samrat, Bangalore. So we are developing from both the mathematics, science, and all. From India's perspective, what are the one of the things is Vedic mathematics, and the other things are also there. Like how can we integrate from the base level to the higher level up to the 12th? So whatever the Indian contributions also, so that it becomes a repository, anybody can utilize this for a good purpose. At a lower level also, I'm involving myself also. It's really great to interact with such people who are
Yes, sir.
very knowledgeable in these systems as well as how to implement it.
So,
Really nice.
yeah, Mr. Gajanan Lohande is part of.
Gajanan only.
We just
Even
last 2 days ago we had a first interaction by
yes,
email.
yeah.
Yes, nice, sir, nice,
Yes.
very nice. So Subramaniam is all right, sir, now? Feeling well?
No, he is slightly, he had some fever and all. From 1 month, he's down. And
Okay, sir.
we have vice principal, she's taking care
Nice,
of him.
nice. Very, very
Uh,
innovative set
yeah,
of
yeah,
people. Yes,
sure.
thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir. Nice.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good
Sir,
evening, sir.
thank you very much for the wonderful session. I have a question,
No,
sir.
I think there was a question also. Yes, sir. Dr. Sylvia wanted to ask something, I think. Sir, I
Yeah,
heard her
yeah,
saying good evening. Can we take that question?
yeah.
Yes,
I too have
yes,
one question,
yes,
and
sir. Yes, sir. After that, we can wind
yes,
up
yes, yeah.
with the
Please,
permission
who
of the.
want to
Yes,
ask a question?
yes.
Please carry on.
Sylvia, madam, was it you? I heard your voice because.
Yes,
Okay,
I'm here.
very good to hear your voice. Yes, she is my
Yes,
colleague, so I was able to hear her voice. So tell me.
yeah. So I just joined late. I thought that it's starting from 6:30 and I just joined at 6:50.
No
So I'm
problem, no
so
problem. We'll
sorry.
discuss
Couldn't
on
hear about
campus.
it.
Yes, ma'am.
But
Go ahead.
yes, the conversation and the question which came up to you, by that, I just only can say that you have already started implementing those things in our university with a different mode of teaching, with a group, individual case studies, other form of involvement is already there. So yes, that means we are under your guidance. So we will be pursuing the way that you are guiding us. So that means we are ahead of it.
Pleasure with all your support, madam. Let's work towards it.
I have
Thank you.
Thank you.
one question, Dr. Chetan, surely.
Sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
sir.
So we as education society, how can we catalyze or how can we bring in better mechanism in educational institutions? Can you give us some sort of guidelines in the next 6 months? In what way we can help educational institution taking your support?
So the first, I'm glad that you have been thinking on that because I think individually it is very difficult to make a representation because each one of us have our own limitations by virtue of our position, time, and so on. So as a collective, there's a lot of work that we could do, and one is to start with engaging, as I just said about this UGC circular, for example. How do we bring the thought process together and you make a representation as a collective to the concerned decision making bodies will be the first thing where this will now come periodically. If I'm not exaggerating, every 1 week from now there'll be new guidelines coming for higher education as along with NEP. Already many have come, including academic bank of credit, so and so forth, multiple entry exit. So but and it will all affect all disciplines. So right now it is the IDP, institutional development plan, which is out there. 11th February is the deadline. So if you may represent as a collective to the UGC and all the other bodies, and to circulate it in such a way that you become the source of information. In fact, from the Karnataka State Higher Education Council, we are planning to have a roundtable discussion very soon on that itself. So you can represent your members' ideas as a collective and make that representation there. Number one. Number two, the same IDP, Institutional Development Plan. So as an association, as a chapter, if you can come out based on that document and adding to that a sort of a template and wherein you can engage with institution as what you call the NEP implementation ambassadors in each institution, and they come and sort of engage with you because there has been a circular that all universities must constitute a task force to implement the NEP at their respective universities. So if you engage with them directly and give them feedback and also get the feedback on how to have this implementation effectively done in order to make impact on quality engineering education where students are the beneficiaries end of the day and faculty members are also. And third quick thing I can share, and there are many, but best thing also is to engage in this continuous professional development of faculty members. How can you as a chapter organize this? For example, take up this formative assessment in engineering education as a theme and bring in the faculty members together beyond your chapter and look at maybe fortunately the online world will help you to go beyond the state also and to see how you can develop a position paper on actually ensuring implementation or bringing case studies into the picture. And if IEEE permits and you have that support, then they can actually publish it. So I'm just thinking aloud on these 3 points, but there are many things which you can think of, sir.
Thank you, sir.
But continuous professional development faculty is very, very critical.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Narendra Babu, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for the
Pleasure.
wonderful session today, sir. You enlightened us with many concepts related to NEP. Sir,
Sir, I have a question.
why
Last question, sir.
one question I have is like now the NEP committee has given bit abstract details of the guidelines and all these things. However, when it comes to the implementation aspect, with respect to various levels, starting from schools, government schools, private schools, Anganwadis, as well as universities, varieties of institutions. But like each guideline for these kind of things will be different. So, will there be any further further guidelines that will be coming to these institutions at different level, or it will be left to the universities or schools at that level to deal with it? Because
Now,
unless
given,
hand
yeah,
holding happens, according to me, it will be really difficult to penetrate this at the village level and all that.
no, sir. I think that is why it was, as you, the last sentence that you mentioned, that this differentiation between urban, rural, and all those things. That is why it is left to the each institution's strengths and their set of locational advantage, disadvantage to come out with their roadmap. But unfortunately, what has happened over time is most institutions are now getting very anxious about the maximum autonomy given to them to decide because they were not used to it. Because autonomy comes with huge responsibility and accountability. So earlier there was passing the buck or what you call blame and person who is not there in the picture and say AICT has told me to do that, UGC has told me to do that, state government has told me to do that. That's what I'm doing now. When the state government is telling, at least from the Karnataka's point, I can tell you, where we have now closely working with the university as the since my other role as special officer to implement NEP in the state government. In fact, we are now working very closely that in the next 2 weeks, institutions must submit their task force report of what they are doing, how they are going about, how are they going to monitor that implementation. So the government is just an enabler here in this case, and that has become a challenge actually. So even a rural institution which is affiliating college to a VTU, even from a rural area, they should also now tell them themselves they assess their strength and weakness. That is the responsibility of the VTU university to make sure that they are able to listen to them, hear them, and then come out with a comprehensive report on how do we differentiate between a college which is in a situation located in a beneficial sort of an environment to situation where they are in the isolated environment. So all these things has to be done at university level, whether it's state university, private university. And now that's where we are awaiting how they will respond. And of course, the government has also taken into account that there is issues of socially economically disadvantaged groups. One has to acknowledge them. Second, universities of unique kind must be also there in each district where the reach out is there, because most private universities are skewed towards urban areas and some public state universities are there in few semi-urban areas, but the rurals are the one which are missing out. So there has to be a special sort of intervention for that, which the government has already amended the act, which is now to be called as Higher Education Institution Act. They'll be given special benefits in terms of land, subsidy and support or grants. So that is the plan, but that is in the spirit of NEP, but not directly engaging with the NEP, because NEP is talking about what institutions could do and can do and should do, and that is what is the task force report telling, sir. So they'll come out with those reports. So it's university's responsibility to take together everybody and engage in a comprehensive plan.
Okay, it will be an interesting exercise at all levels, and it will be challenging
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So
It's a
we
bottom
will
up.
have
It
to.
is challenging, but it is actually making them to think now. Otherwise, they were all waiting for circulars saying that let us see what the circular comes. But now we need to proactively tell them that as an institution, that I stay here, I stay there, but I have my challenges. So now let me come together and solve this problem. But problem was universities were not interacting with colleges, especially affiliating colleges. Yeah. So now it is time that they should write, but we have to write and submit it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any
So
questions?
great session,
We are
sir. I
almost
heard
reached at
somebody
the end of
asking
the.
questions, but
Sir, I have a
yeah,
question, sir.
I heard
Uh,
Sunita
sir,
madam,
due,
I think. Sunita madam.
sir,
Sunita
due to
Chakraborty
9,
madam.
yes, sir, from 9 to
Yes,
12
madam.
standard, according to the
Hello.
new education policy, it says that they can choose any subject. Okay, fine. Are you able to hear me?
She
Hello,
has a
sir.
guest
Are
at
you able?
home. Madam, going by the new education policy, students can, sorry,
Sir, according to 9
there's
to
again
12 standard,
some,
according to 9 to 12 standard, according to the new education policy, the students can choose their own subject, right? So what will be the impact of new education policy for the national entrance test? Are they going to be held or they are not going to be held? Because the subjects will be different from 9
yeah,
to
for,
12 standard. And what about the GE exam or the NET exams that have joint entrance exam? What will be
yeah. So this point had come up in the committee discussion. So what was agreed upon is that these tests are critical and they will continue to exist. The nature and the questions to be asked in the test will be changed, which are going to be multidisciplinary in nature. So wherein they are going to assess them based on what they have learned from 8th to 12th grade. And as a result, because as early as 8th grade, they are exposed to multidisciplinarity as well as life skills and soft skills. So those should be now. So the overall template, nature, and the type of questions in this examination, they will continue because there is a proposal of National Testing Agency which has been proposed in the NEP. They will continue, but the sort of type of questions and the mode of assessment will change in terms of reflecting on multidisciplinarity.
So
They will
one
change.
thing I want to, sir, one thing I want to, they have not included medical and not included legal, right? Those two aspects
Yes.
they have not included. So I think NET will be persisting as per the this thing, and is it
Yeah,
a difference will
they
be
will
there
they
for
will
the
persist,
engineering
madam.
student? Hmm.
See what has happened is the Medical Council of India has now changed into National Medical Commission, right? So there are four verticals: undergraduate, postgraduate, accreditation, and assessment vertical. So now it is because the MCI was then not ready to be appropriated into the NEP directly, because medical education has mostly to do with the professional education of other types, especially engineering, agriculture, and all in the NEP. But here, if you see, NEP is the first and the only document of education policy which mentions about emphasis on preventive care that medical education should have, for example. So those sort of inputs are already part of the NMC's amendments which have been made and gazette notification has been issued. So going forward, as I said, the exams will remain, but the exams will now change their nature because they have to appropriate some of these things and also acknowledge that students who come into taking those examination, irrespective whether they are there or not there, that students who are coming there are coming from multidisciplinary background, right? So that is why they anyways invariably have to change. Maybe not in 2022, but maybe 2028, 29, or 30, they ought to change. So they have to prepare now, whether it is NMC being part of NEP or not directly once the HECI bill comes in. But the thing is that the very fact that those 4 years which prepare students for getting into NEET, they are having a syllabus which is going to be multidisciplinary. They ought to change that. So there's not much contradiction because there's another policy which talks about education as a continuum. So whatever reforms happen in school education are going to impact higher education, right? So they will change, but it will take time, right? The best example to think about is UPSC examination, civil service, IAS. The idea, the minimum eligibility for civil service examination was any degree. But can you tell me, you and me can write civil service examination without going to coaching centers today? Because we both have degree. We have undergraduate degree, but we cannot write it because we are not confident about it, isn't it? Because the evaluation method, the type of question papers have changed so much because of these pressures from the coaching centers today. they have set a benchmark higher. So similarly, when the school education curriculum changes, these testing bodies will also have to respond to that, Sunita madam. But it will take time. It will not happen next year, but in gradual course of time, it will happen.
Thank you, sir.
I
Thank you.
have one question. Sylvia
Sir,
speaking.
thank you. Yeah. Ah, okay.
Yes, sir. The last maybe. So it is by hearing this, what a question came to my mind, that the concept of humanities, that means arts, commerce, and science, and which
Hmm.
is always been placed into a hierarchical form, science, commerce, and arts. So will this concept will be there or removed from the NEP? Because after class 10, the students will be able to choose their field according to their interest. So there will be a our students may take mathematics or any of the best biology and history, it may happen. So the concept will remain, or the concept will move away from this NEP policy?
Yeah, this concept of major minor is being brought back, which was there earlier. So
Mm-hmm.
students will have major in few subjects which they will choose as their major, where
Okay.
the most of their assessment and teaching learning will happen around that. And there's also
Mm-hmm.
minor which they can take, which is almost like supporting the major, or maybe a course
Mm-hmm.
which will help them to. So that way, that
Mm-hmm.
flexibility will be there. So moment when they move from
Oh,
first year somewhere to second year somewhere, they can either move between this major and minor. So they can convert their minor into major later on,
okay.
and or they continue the major as major elsewhere. So that option is there in the multi. That's what the academic bank of credit talks about. So the here the unit of measurement is not the course, but the credits earned by the student.
Uh-huh.
That is the
So,
unit. That is where the
okay.
flexibility comes in. So till
Okay.
date, I sometimes get astonished, and I'm sure I would like to be corrected from or supported by members listening to me when I ask our students wherever I go in any sessions, how many credits is your degree?
Uh-huh.
They look at each other. They don't know how many credits they're earning from a degree,
Mm.
and they don't know the implications of that, because higher the credits means more number of hours in the classroom,
Mm.
and as a result of that, it's kind of affecting their creativity and innovative thinking. Not that
Mm.
classrooms are bad; they are required, but they're required as a minimum level, not at a maximum level. They're supposed to be
Mm.
facilitating or enabling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bindu
Mm-hmm.
says she agrees with me. So I think that is where is the issue. The students themselves are not aware that they're getting a degree for credits, which is supposed to be not that much, but beyond that. But now the unit of credit, because of academic bank of credit, is coming into big way. But it will not change overnight. It will take few years.
Mm-hmm.
The thinking has started now. At least you and me might have experienced parents asking that question today. What is this
Yes.
credit? What is the credit that? And then I say 15 hours of theory is one credit, 30 hours of practical is equal to one credit. Then they start
Mm.
thinking and thinking about, 15 hours. So they calculate how many credit is the course. So I say 148. So 148 into 15. Oh, so many thousands hours they actually study. That itself is now starting to make some difference. And we
Mm.
are also now thinking, oh, we are teaching 60 hours for a 4 credit, 45 hours for 3 credit. So
Mm.
that. So it will take time.
Mm.
It's more often in the first phase of change.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Narendra Babu sir,
Yeah,
please relieve me.
we are,
Otherwise, my
yeah,
house
we
doors will be
have
closed for
come to
this week.
the end
And
of the session, sir.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
But a very
I
good,
think
very, very
there are a lot of
valuable.
enthusiasm and interesting points
Yes, yes,
raised by our
absolutely.
people. I think maybe I take the questions in case if you have. I request all the participants to mail me the questions in case if you have. I'll communicate with Dr. Chetan and
Yes, yes.
maybe we can get back to you on this details.
Sure, sure.
So fine, sir.
Thank you,
Really,
sir.
I thank you on behalf. I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Chaitan Singai for delivering the wonderful session today on NEP, the
Thank you.
implementation of NEP drivers and barriers. As a token of appreciation, like since it is a virtual event, we have to devise different ways. So I'm sending you on behalf of IEEE Education Society and RUAS student branch, IEEE student branch, sending you one gift voucher. Just send, sir. Like, that's all I can tell you now, since it is
Thank you. Thank you. No,
online.
my
A click,
gift
you will be
is
hearing a click and you will be
implementation.
receiving at the email.
Yes, sir, yes. Thank you so much. That's your love and blessings. But the best gift is to, as I said to Archana madam, practice it and write about it. That's the best gift that we can all have for ourselves, right? Which will stay for a long time with us. Thank you so much.
I also thank all the faculty members from various institutions who have joined and really participated very enthusiastically in this discussion webinar. And I especially thank all the RUAS IEEE student branch chapter members, especially Deepak Varadam, Kiran Kumar, Dr. Malti, for helping me in organizing this event. I also thank all the IEEE Education Society office bearers and the members who are present directly or indirectly, who helped me in organizing this event. Finally, I thank all the people who have joined this event and become a part of this webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you,
Please
sir.
send me questions in case if you have, and
Please.
if you want to.
Please visit our campus once you're around there. We can all have a chai pe charcha. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. This is definitely required, because we still have a lot of questions in our mind.
Yeah.
Probably the second phase will, maybe we will that kind of interaction will help.
Yes,
Because
sir.
of this virtual session, not much of a thing. Only we will have to limit to the virtual thing. Maybe we will have one day physical session.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Thank you all, professors. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.